Thanks, Madge. I just wanted to begin this session with an acknowledgement of country, if that's okay. I want to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, who are the traditional custodians of the land on which I'm on today, and I want to pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I also extend that respect to Aboriginals and Torres Strait Islanders who are joining us online today. I also want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which everyone is joining us today, and please feel free to type that into the chat. I'd really like to know where everyone's coming from. So we're about to watch a screening of Running Out. So Running Out is a Brian Hayes documentary following the story of ultra runner Lucy Bartholomew, who has just joined us online, who runs 231 kilometres across the Larapinta Trail in the Northern Territory. So first we'll watch the 10-minute version of the movie, and I believe the full version comes out, if I read Lucy's Instagram story correctly, in 10 days' time. And then we will be joining Lucy with a question and answer session.
Awesome. So for this one, it's not released yet, so I'm going to stream it through Zoom. So hopefully, fingers crossed, this works. So while I set that up, maybe, did you have anything you wanted to add before we check out Running Out, Lucy? Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, so correct, 10 days until Running Out goes live, the full film. So we're seeing a 10-minute excerpt of what is a 40, 43, 45-minute film, depending how much of the credits you watch. But yeah, it's about running the Larapinta Trail, about the people, passion and place that kind of was on. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoy it.
That is so cool. I have a couple main questions that I'd really love to ask, and then I'm more than happy to put it out to everyone in the audience. I'm sure there's a bunch of questions. First of all, what I really love about Running Out is the fact that there's so many different sort of takeaways, and me as the viewer, I'm able to place like different amounts of emphasis on those takeaways depending on sort of what resonates with me and what I'm going through in a sort of day. So for example, female power and the fact that you're a perfect example of the fact that women can participate in the great outdoors as equally as men. They just haven't been given as much opportunity to do so far. And then another key takeaway for me is that sense of friendship. I was just wondering if there's any key takeaways that you really want people to actually go away with from that movie.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think for me, I really wanted to highlight like the people, the place, and the passion of running. So for me, it was kind of, we've got these beautiful places to explore. And I think, I travel the world to run, and I hadn't experienced this place that was just in my backyard, essentially. Backyard being quite a long drive away, but nonetheless, on the same land as me. And then, we can have these beautiful places, but it's so much better and so much more fulfilling to share them with people. And, I met Josh and Brian in January, and I spent 2 weeks hiking with them and was just kind of like, these guys are incredible. I feel comfortable to sit in the car with them and then sit in the desert and then watch me suffer and then drive me home. But then also to arrive into Alice Springs and to have the community that I'd heard so many things about. And I heard about them through my mom, who's, she's nearly 60 years old, and she visited Alice Springs when she was in her early 30s. And she was like, Lucy, the Alice Springs community is so incredible. And I, obviously wasn't expecting the same experience, but it's kind of stayed on and stayed within that community, which is really, really special. And then, you tie that together with running, which I think running is such a beautiful thing that just breaks people down and builds people up. And, this Running Out film is meant to kind of show that. It's not aesthetically pleasing the whole time. I look rubbish for a lot of it, but it's a very real and a very raw recount. I kind of was saying to Brian the other day, I was like, I think I need to put a post out before this goes live that kind of says, don't I don't want to promote putting yourself into the position that I found myself in a few times in that movie, because it comes with risks and it comes with consequences. And, 10 years in the sport, and I felt like I was in a place that I could go there. But yeah, it's pretty powerful when you do, and incredible to have the support of the community, my team, to be on that land to do that, and to have running take me there when it's taken me to so many places.
I vaguely remember in a different podcast, you said that you ended up on like some cliff face in the middle of the night. So I'm guessing that's one of those experiences that would come on that post-it note.
Yeah, and just kind of, there's a section where I don't have water for 7 hours, and what that does to your body is not fun. I was trying to lick my tears. I was looking for any puddle of, it could have been cow pee, and I would have been like, amazing, this is going to save my life. So it's pretty incredible to go past that point and to endure it, but it's not something you should be striving, because I wouldn't want to have done that if I could redo it again.
Fair enough. In a podcast with Dylan Bowman, you said that in the first 30 kilometers, you got to the top of like your first mountain and had a mental breakdown and called your dad. And I know that in the ultra endurance world, there's so much emphasis that's placed on practical aspects of training, such as your long run Sundays, tempo runs, cruisy runs for recovery. And there seems to be sort of a dearth of information about how to actually mentally train for such long distances. So I just want to know, do you think that you can actually mentally prepare for such enormous distances, such as the Larapinta Trail? Or do you think that people who actually undertake ultra endurance events and naturally like have that mental endurance so they don't need to train it at all? Like, what's your sort of opinion on that, I guess?
Yeah, I think, when I went into this Larapinta, we just came out of a lockdown in Melbourne. And in that time, I trained for the 1 hour that was allowed, the 5-kilometer radius. And so, I was by no means fit. And I think that that's really a key thing, is that I was not in like a prime state. I'd done one 50K race just because it was available at the Warburton 50 trail race. And then I kind of went back to my 1 hour and 5K radius. And my coach said to me, because I said, I don't think I'm fit enough. I haven't done the hours and the long runs and that. And he said, Lucy, you've been running for 10 years. You've been laying brick by brick a strong foundation. And he said to me, more than being fit when you're running this type of distance, it's more important to be uninjured and to be stoked. And those were two things that I was abundant in. I wasn't injured because I hadn't run that much. And I was super stoked because I'd been sitting in 4 walls and running my regular block loop at home. And all I wanted more than anything was to run as far as I wanted for as long as I wanted. So I think that when you get to that kind of distance, it's so much more about being mentally with it and mentally there. And, you say that I had this mental breakdown at 30 kilometers. And it really came down to when you look at something like 230 kilometers and you're 30 kilometers in and it feels really hard and it's really hot and the trail is really tough, to mentally by yourself in the middle of the Larapinta Trail, in the middle of the, as the sun's setting, to kind of bring yourself back and be like, Lucy, you got this. Let's check it step by step, 5K by 5K. I just kind of went, I can't do 200 more kilometers of this. Who are you, Lucy? Who do you think you are, putting yourself in this position? You're disrespecting the sport, the land, like this track, this trail. And I just had to, I called my dad, and one of the maps I had on my phone was where there was like a bar of reception. And it just happened to be at that point. And I called my dad, who was just sitting on the couch with our dog. And he was just like, Lucy, you know what to do. When it turns to night, which was, within that hour, you're going to turn your headlight on. There's going to be a small patch of light, and you're going to just focus on that. And you're going to focus putting your foot into that light, not tripping and staying upright. And the moment that it turned to darkness and I wasn't overwhelmed by the trail off into the distance and the mountains around me and the ruggedness that I'd kind of been staring at for a few hours, it became really simple. And it was like, cool, let's just focus on this patch of light, this next step. And that was kind of all I needed to hear, because I just took that then for the next 50 hours.
It seems like you have incredible mental strength to be able to get through something like that. And I was just curious if anyone else has any questions for Lucy. If you wanted to take yourself off mute and ask them, or pop them in the chat. Otherwise, I've got a bunch more that I can keep going with, but I'd prefer to hear from everyone else.
I have a quick question. What is it like watching it back, Lucy? Because like obviously we've only seen the first 10 minutes, and I believe it's like 30 minutes or so, the final cut, and like, you know, things are going to get pretty interesting. But like, yeah, is it, because it sounds like it was a, you know, I guess things in hindsight can be a fun experience, but at the time were like, you know, incredibly tough. But yeah, what's it like for you to like watch that and kind of see yourself back there again, you know, like a few months on when you're, you know, recovered and like all the, you know, scars and bruises have disappeared and you're feeling good again?
Yeah, it's really challenging, hey, because when I am at the worst spot, which luckily there's a camera shoved in my face at that moment, you know, I watch it back and I think, how did my crew not pull me out? And how did this continue? How did I think this was a good idea? And you know, I didn't know what I looked like, and as far as I was concerned, I hadn't snapped my ankle or hurt my legs, because my hands were all good. But you know, you can see briefly there that I have like immense dirt around my lips. Looks like I'm wearing black lipstick. It wasn't my choice, but that was after the 7 hours without water, and it was just kind of like the dust and everything had settled and crusted me up. And I look back at that and I see like how puffy and water retention, and my body just in this complete state of, you know, fighting itself. And it's, you know, to watch that and to go, you know, I put myself through that. And then I went, I'm going to keep going. You know, at that point, I still had 150 kilometers to go. So it was, I think it's really confronting. I think it's easy to pick yourself apart and to say, you know, like, this isn't what I want to represent in running. I think, you know, my dad watches it and he's like, if I'd known that when Brian called me and said that you were just kind of had a bit of trouble with water, but you're going to keep going, if he'd seen me, he would have been like, stop my daughter right now. Like, this is not, I don't want her doing this. So I think it's really challenging, and it's really, but I'm also really, really proud that we've kind of kept it super raw and super vulnerable and very kind of authentic to the experience, because it takes everyone along for the ride, and running 250 kilometers is not pretty. It's never going to be pretty the whole time. And yeah, I'm happy to show the puffy, crusted, black-lipped side of Lucy that doesn't make the Instagram grid most of the time.
That's awesome. And what were the other hikers that you saw? Because there would have been, you know, they showed the people at the start, but would have been people further along the trail that have like been where you've been and, you know, hiking, and have probably found it tough. And then to see you like, you know, not always, but sailing past or like attempting to do the thing in one full go. What were those interactions like?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. Before we started, you know, we didn't do it at the best time to hike the trail. You know, March is renowned for being pretty hot, and there'd been a big bunch of water that had fallen in the area, which made it really green and really beautiful. It filled up a lot of water holes that we expected to be dry, which was handy. And I swam for like 3 kilometers of the track, which is just unheard of in the Northern Territory. It's good that I love swimming, but we'd also heard just before I started, the people that were doing my PLB, they said, we've evacuated every person that we've dropped off at the start, which was about 60 people, due to just the heat, the change in conditions, like because of the mass water, lots of grass had grown and the trail markers were hard to find. And so there'd been a lot of rescues, and the guy who was managing our trip, was kind of a little bit not stoked on the timing and everything like that, but we backed ourselves into that. So I passed those 2 people on Mount Sonder, and then I didn't pass anyone for the remainder of it, except for one guy who was camping on the bluff. But when I saw him, I was in the second night. I'd just come off the 7 hours without water. So I was in a pretty precarious situation. I'd been well hydrated at the meeting my crew, but I'd been hiking up and I'd been hallucinating tents on the side of the track. And I think I was hallucinating tents because I was like not wanting to be alone. And so I was like, oh, I'm good. Like, look, there's lots of people in this section. If I need anything, I'll just knock on the tent. They'll let me in, get me some water. I can have a snooze, whatever. Like, this is great. And I got to the top of the bluff and there was another tent and this guy came out and he said, you must be Lucy. And I looked at him and I was like, no, you're hallucination because you don't know my name. No one knows me out here. Anyway, he shook my hand and I was like, oh, okay, you are a person. And I said, oh, it's great you're camping up here. There's so many people camping back there. And he kind of said to me, he was like, Lucy, there is nobody out there. And it was kind of like a really crazy moment. I remember leaving because he actually found me on Instagram like a few months later and he was like, I can't believe you made it. He said, you know, I went back into my tent and said to my wife, like, I don't think she's gonna do it. But those were the only two people before the Alice Springs community met me with 20 Ks to go and then ran with me the last 8 kilometers. I had company.
Wow, yeah, it's even more terrifying knowing that you're out there on your own. Like, yeah. But lucky for the hallucinations. Sounds like they kind of came in handy.
I wasn't really alone.
Lucy, I have a question if that's all right. I was wondering, I remember seeing your Instagram post about those hallucinations. And I was wondering if that's something you have on, like, do you experience that kind of hallucination stage on most of your ultras, or was that specific because of the heat and the dehydration, or, yeah?
Yeah, that's a great question. I have never experienced hallucinations prior to this this trip, and I think because I hadn't experienced them, I was so like unsure of what was true and what was not. I remember speaking to an ultra runner who does quite a lot of these long hours, Courtney Water, and she kind of said, you know, she kind of looks forward to it because she can kind of go, that's not real. And they've almost morphed themselves into a bit of more of a fun thing for her. Whereas for me, it was more, you know, I was seeing tents and then I was seeing like my crew, and then I was seeing with the bark and the trees, I thought they were skeletons. I was seeing riding on the rocks, and then I was hallucinating a repetition of that riding. So I thought navigationally I'd gone in a circle. So it wasn't like super fun for me because I was like touching rocks to see if it was Josh O'Brien. And then I was looking at my map being like, I've seen this before, I'm going in a circle. And so, yeah, it's something I think that it comes when you go into that extreme in fatigue with sleep and nutrition and just heat. But, you know, not, like Courtney, I'm not looking forward to it. I was just kind of, I would stay in races that don't bring me to that point would be nice.
I might jump in with a question if that's okay. I want to ask kind of like 2 parts. Was it the hardest thing you've ever done? And then kind of what measures have you been taking since doing it to just look after yourself and to recuperate?
Yeah. Hi, Alice.
Yeah, it's me.
Congratulations on guessing the Sunto week.
Thank you. Well done on running it.
So the first question was, sorry, what?
Was it the hardest thing you've ever done?
Yeah, so yes, definitely. I think, you know, it may not have been the fastest pace or the fastest time, you know, or the splits or anything I've ever done. But I think what challenged me the most was because I was out there by myself I had company for about 50 kilometers of the 250 kilometers I ran. So just to give you an idea, the track is 231 kilometers, but I did 250 with my out and backs and navigational errors. And what really challenged me was that it was, you know, 50 plus hours of me kind of having to listen to kind of two voices, of one saying, you can do this, this is great, you're doing fine, one step at a time. And then the other voice being like, you're going so slow. What are you doing out here? Like, just stop. And then, you're trying to manage those voices that everyone has, but you're trying to, mute the negativity, and then you're trying to fuel, and then you're trying to navigate. And it's not like when you put a bib on and you're kind of like, great, like I've paid money to be here so people can organize for me the navigation. I just carry my fuel and mandatory gear until I get to the next checkpoint. And so I only saw Josh and Brian every 8 hours at the best. And so that was really kind of like 8 hours of me having to look after myself and be really switched on, which was fine for maybe the first day. But as someone who usually sleeps like 8 hours a night, 3 minutes in 3 days is not something that I would recommend. And then, so measures I've taken since have been, my body was pretty beat up. When you take yourself to that kind of point, physically, mentally, emotionally, I think like my body responded the best out of it. I was kind of like, wow, I can run. I'm like, I think within 5 days, I was like, oh, let's go for a jog, and running quite fast, because my body was just like, look at this path with no rocks and it's not beating down sun. And like this is so easy. But then, after that kind of 30 minutes, I was so cooked and so just tired from it. And so I've really just respected that, taken time off. Obviously, the pandemic continued, lockdowns continued, and I didn't try and fight it. I just kind of, went within myself, did my little loops of my block, waved to my neighbors, ate a lot of food, slept as much as I could. And doing this whole filmmaking process has been really new for me. And so I just kind of invested my time into that. Which has kind of felt like running, just watching it. I'm like, wow, I'm exhausted just following this film. So yeah, it's just kind of, I want to enter, as things start opening up, in the best way possible. And to do that, I had to I use the word sacrifice, but it's not the word I'd like to use. The rest of this time of this year, to just kind of really chill out and respect what 250 kilometers does to you. And just want to be back to being uninjured and stoked, which I'm uninjured, but I'm still working on the stoked aspect of maybe going to the well again.
Thank you. That's a really cool answer.
Thank you.
How are we going for time, Hilary? Do we have any time for any more questions at all?
Well, we've kind of we're pretty flexible. So I guess it's as long as we've got questions and we've got some Lucy's time, we're kind of good. So
I've got one more question.
Oh, fire away, Jodie.
So obviously it was incredibly challenging, but what was the best bit? Like, what was that amazing moment where you went, it was all worth it?
I would say when the Alice Springs community, when we arrived into Alice Springs, we didn't have a whole lot of time to hang out with the community, but we went along to a movie night there and met the community, and they, kind of understood we had this Salomon branded car. If they saw it around town, come say hi. And they ended up making a Facebook Messenger group, and they would say, oh, Lucy's car the Salomon car has been spotted at certain points along the Lara Pinta, and that was how they were tracking us. And when they saw that the car was parked and there was a aid station set up with 20 Ks to go, the whole of Alice Springs, like I think the kids took the day off school, everyone boycotted work, and I came in, admittedly like 6 hours late to what we kind of had envisioned, but they were all there, all cheering. And one of them kind of said to me, and they were a bit nervous to ask, they're like, oh, do you think you'd want any company? And I was like, oh, please, yes, please. And so they all drove back into Alice, got their running shoes, picked up their hydration vests, and between the last 22 kilometers, depending on what they felt like they wanted to join for, they joined along the way. And it started off with me and just Mark, who's the race director of a race up there. And then by the end, there was about 30 of us and lots of little kids with their little headlights running into Alice Springs. And it finishes at Telegraph Station, which is just like this little park, and up there they'd set up this big bed sheet that everyone had signed and written all these nice messages and had music going and fairy lights, and it was kind of more than I was expecting. I think, when you envision these things, I was like, now Lucy, be prepared that it'll probably just be a line in the sand that Josh and Brian have drawn, and then you'll just take your shoes off and go to bed. But instead, it was Good Friday, so nothing was open in town. There was no food, and they knew that we hadn't thought of that, so they made us dinner, and we'd all kind of sat round. And even though I was so exhausted, I was just so amped up on the community's energy for that last bit, because it held me together.
So when the movie's released, Lucy, where's it going to be? Where can we see the full thing? And is there going to be anything in person? That's the ultimate question.
Yeah, so you can follow the Running Out movie on Instagram, and that kind of will have the links, the link to the website, which will have all the links to the different places that you can watch it. We have visions of doing in-person screenings. So on October 30th, Alice Springs is actually all gathering to watch it. It was my most importantly for me was that they saw it first and that they enjoyed it, because it is about them, and they feature highly. So I'm really excited for them to watch it there and to see her. I think they've got about 300 people attending, which as a Melbourne person is just unfathomable in one place, in a room inside. But as things start easing and we can do some travel, we're hoping to do some things down in the Surf Coast, Hillary, and then I really want to support like running stores. So like Pace Athletic in Sydney, Wild Earth up in Queensland, Sportitude in Adelaide. I mean, I feel like they need the support they can get right now, and they've always supported me with Solomon events and stuff. So we're hoping to do screenings through them. And if you want to put one on or do whatever you want to do with it, like, absolutely, the more eyes is on it is all I really want. I just want people, and especially females, to look at it, not to aspire to maybe kill themselves as much as I did, but to to dream a little and to put themselves out there and to try hard things and to admit that you screwed up. Like I admit throughout the film that I shouldn't have left with little water. That was my fault. But to own it, to grit through it, and then to smile back at it and be like, if I suffer through something, then at least I have something to share with others to maybe help clear their path a little bit. So they were hoping to do screenings, and they will be also on the website. We'll just pop them up as they come together.
That's awesome. And I think as well, like, how do you think, like, I feel like we'll have as Australians have one kind of, I don't know, understanding of it, but then like, it's going to, because it's for Solomon, it's going to go global. And like, what do you kind of think that people from, all around the world are going to think? Because are they going to be like, people already have, think Australia is like full of deadly animals that want to kill you. And then here you are like going through this amazing landscape that it is a desert, but it's incredibly mountainous, and I think might surprise people because they probably just think all our deserts are flat and, full of cactus or something. Like, what do you think that the international audience are going to think of just like the landscape?
I think they're going to think, when they think of Australia, they think of red sand and the desert and kangaroos and emus and most of the animals trying to attack you. But I think that it will, and I hope it opens their eyes to, it's a rough landscape and it's rugged, and it's what makes Australia, Australia. And it's beautiful and it's challenging. And I hope it, makes them want to come and visit that. I think that, yes, we are known for our beautiful coastlines and that's cool. But like when you visit that heart center and you meet those people that live amongst that, that's a really powerful thing. I know that we use Dylan Bowman's voice in it, which is an American. He's an American and does Pillars podcast. And I think, when we did that podcast and we spoke about it, he said, I just had overwhelming feedback of like, I didn't know that's what it was like out there. And I hope that just kind of opens people's eyes. Solomon's never made a TV or an episode, Solomon TV or an episode on red sand or on Australian soil. And, you know, as an Australian athlete for them, I felt like it was a really cool opportunity to do the first and to hopefully do it justice and put it on the map and just show that, yeah, we're a long way away from a lot of things, but it's worth the trip. And not just for the running, but the people and the places and the history more than probably just the animals that want to eat you.
Did you see any other animals or any animals?
No, you know, I thought I was going to see just so many snakes, and I didn't see one. My crew saw a dingo, and that's in the film, which I think is hilarious because it's just like they want to make it seem really intimidating that, you know, these were all about. And I was like, I didn't see nothing. The only thing I saw was spiders, and big spider webs, and these spiders have like a yellow thing in their back that lights up at night. And so I was thinking that they were markers and was like running towards them, and then I would run into them and I would have spider on my face. And that was probably like the best interaction with an animal that I had.
That sounds like a nightmarish interaction, and also just like what happens on early morning runs for me, and just don't like it.
Yeah, well, I got to the point where I was like running with like a branch and just like, you know, just waving it the whole time. And I was like, my legs are fine, but my shoulder is like killing me from doing this.
I'm sure you looked great out on the trail doing that.
I was a statement out there, you know. It's not pretty.
It's fantastic. I know we've taken up a lot of your time, and so I just wanted to say thank you so much for joining us and for letting us screen your film, and absolutely stoked to be able to watch the full version of it in 10 days. So thank you very much.
Oh, well, thank you. I mean, the trailer's gone out, but this 10-minute clip has only been shown once. Otherwise, this 10-minute clip was never meant to be a thing. So we're really stoked that For Wild Places could be the second and the last place to share it. It's, I hope you love the full film. And I hope after this, I think you'll have a better insight into what it looked like behind the cameras and in my mind. So thank you so much for Wild Places, to Hillary, to Elle, to everyone for tuning in. And I hope you love it. And either way, I hope you just get out the door and put your shoes on.
For sure. It's inspiring. Thanks, Lucy.
Thank you so much, Lucy.
Thanks, Lucy.